Welcome to Dark Britain Files. These are the stories of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. They are tales of chance encounters and sinister intentions, of the quiet dread that lurks just beneath the surface of everyday life. Today we delve into 3 accounts of suspicion, violation, and the chilling realization that the world can be a much darker place than it seems. Story 1. The Stolen Tahoe. My name is Artie. This happened in April of 1996. I was 24, fresh out of basic training, and assigned to an air base in San Angelo, Texas. My closest friends on base were Seabass and Kay, and we were inseparable. One warm weekend, we decided to take a road trip to Austin to get away from the base's monotony. Kay offered to drive, and about an hour into the trip, on a mostly empty stretch of highway, Seabass pointed out a dark-colored Tahoe that had pulled off the shoulder right after we had passed. It was a little odd, but not a huge deal. Then Kay changed lanes and the SUV followed. She did it again, and it mirrored her move. We were getting pulled over. Kay pulled over, and as a trained observer, I instantly noticed something was off. The man who got out wasn't a cop. He was in all black tactical gear, but there was nothing on him that said police. He didn't behave like an officer either. Instead of approaching Kay's window, he stood behind the car, analyzing our bumper stickers and looking at the luggage in the back. Seabass rolled his window down and asked if there was a problem. The man ignored him, walked up to Kay's window, and asked for her license and registration. He took her documents and disappeared into his car for a really long time. We were all whispering about how strange this was. Finally, he got out of his car again, this time with 2 other men. My heartbeat ticked up, and I did my best to stay calm. He walked up to Kay's window and asked her if her father was in the army, pointing to the military sticker on the back of her car. Kay laughed and said, "I'm the one in the military." She then looked at Seabass and me and said, "Them too." The moment she mentioned we were all in the military, I saw a shift in his body language. He stiffened, glanced at the other 2 men, and then back at Kay. After a strange silence, he handed back her license and told her he was letting her off with a warning. The 3 of them got in their car and sped off before we could even start the engine. Seabass was convinced they weren't real officers. We eventually made it to Austin and had a good time, forgetting about the whole thing. A week later, I was watching the local news when a story came on that made me freeze. A man and a woman had been found dead in a ditch, along the same stretch of highway where we had been pulled over. They had been robbed and murdered. The vehicle found abandoned nearby was a black Tahoe, which had been reported stolen months earlier. Seabass, Kay, and I immediately went to the police and told them everything. I felt a surge of guilt for not telling them sooner. To this day, I still think about how Kay's military bumper sticker may have saved our lives. It's a chilling reminder of how easily it could have been us in that ditch. Story 2. The Dead Phone. I've always been a private person, and it's taken me a decade to feel comfortable telling this story. About 10 years ago, I was on a solo road trip from New Jersey to Fort Worth, Texas. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, my car started acting up. I pulled over, popped the hood, and pretended I knew what I was doing while I waited to call for help. A few minutes later, a nondescript white pickup truck pulled up behind me. A man in his mid-30s with a long unkempt beard got out. He had the kind of worn-down look of a guy who worked with his hands. He was about my height and build and honestly looked like an older, less well-groomed version of me. He didn't ask if I needed help, he assumed it. He leaned over my engine and told me he was a mechanic. I was so relieved and grateful that I didn't question it. After a minute of fiddling, he stepped back and said he needed a compression tester. He told me his friend, another mechanic, could bring one over, and that's when he asked to borrow my phone because his was dead. I didn't think twice. I pulled my phone out and handed it to him. In the same motion, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a gun, and told me to sit on the shoulder and not try anything stupid. He rifled through my pockets, took my wallet, my backpack, and even had me show him the password to my phone. Then he drove off. I was livid. I had just been robbed on the side of the road. Eventually, another car stopped and helped me get my car started. I made it to my parents' house later that night. The next few weeks were a blur of canceling cards, replacing IDs, and changing passwords. I squared away as much as I could and got on with my life. Fast forward 6 months. That's when things started to hit the fan. I got a letter from a bank I didn't recognize, thanking me for opening a new line of credit. Then another, this time from Best Buy, for over $1,000 of charges in a random town in Tennessee. I had forgotten that my Social Security card was in my wallet when I was robbed. The guy had everything he needed to become me. The next month was a living hell. My credit report was a mess, and every day brought a new hard inquiry. A new card or a balance I didn't spend. I did everything you're supposed to do. I filed a report with the FTC, placed a fraud alert, and froze my credit. I went to the police, but without a name or a license plate, they couldn't do a thing. Things escalated. I got a call from my health insurance provider. Someone had received emergency care under my name at a hospital in Georgia. The man had not only stolen my identity, but was now creating records that could compromise my medical history. That was the last straw. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started spending every ounce of my free time trying to track him down. I set up Google Alerts, checked my credit report, and scanned forums. One night, on a whim, I checked Craigslist, focusing on cities tied to the fraud. Something caught my eye, a posting for a bunch of used power tools in Jackson, Tennessee. The longer I looked, the more familiar it seemed. Everything listed matched up perfectly with the things that had been charged to that Best Buy card. I responded to the listing, keeping it simple. To my surprise, he responded, and after a few days of emails, he gave me a time and public place to meet. I debated driving all the way to Tennessee myself, but I knew I couldn't trust myself to face him alone. Instead, I called the Jackson Police Department. I pleaded with them to help me, and by some miracle, they told me the details lined up just well enough for them to look into it. I got the guy to tell me he was driving a red pickup truck, and I relayed that to the police. After several hours, they called me back. The officer told me that as soon as the guy saw the patrol cars, he sped out of the lot. He ended up losing control of his truck and crashing into a ditch. When the police questioned him about the Craigslist items, he folded, admitting a friend had given them to him. He ratted out his friends, and with his cooperation, the police were able to acquire enough evidence to arrest the real perpetrators. I've never felt more relief in my life. The guy who robbed me wasn't acting alone. There were 3 of them in total, and they had been targeting travelers and isolated drivers up and down the interstate, mostly in the South. Eventually, all 3 of them were caught, charged, and sent to jail. Justice was served. Story 3, The Deltopia Shadow. I was a student at a smaller public university in California, a place that felt more like a tight-knit community than a sprawling campus. Most of the bigger UC schools, like UCLA and Berkeley and Santa Barbara, had their own versions of a dedicated tour day for incoming students. But for those of us already there, these days were just a pretext for an all-out, all-day party. Cal Day at Berkeley and Deltopia at Santa Barbara were legends. My campus was a good 2.5-hour drive from Santa Barbara, but it wasn't uncommon for students from other schools to make the pilgrimage. I'd never been one for that kind of partying. But as my senior year crept in, the thought that I'd never get another chance started to eat at me. So when my friends asked if I wanted to come with them to Santa Barbara's Deltopia, I decided to just say screw it. We left on a Friday afternoon, the day before the major festivities. The car was a tight squeeze. Hunter was driving, and the rest of us, Damon, Benjamin, and Armin, were packed in like sardines. We're all above 6 feet, so the journey was physically cramped. But the hours flew by with a blur of good conversation and even better music. There was a buzz of excitement in the air, a sense of adventure that comes with escaping the familiar and heading into the unknown. As we got closer to Isla Vista, the landscape changed from the open, dusty fields of the Central Valley to a dense web of houses and people. It was a carnival of chaos, with students already spilling out onto the streets, music blaring from every window. Our first challenge was finding a parking spot. I am not exaggerating when I say we spent the better part of an hour circling the same few blocks, with no luck. That's how popular Deltopia is. Just as we were about to admit defeat and start looking for a paid lot, Hunter, a born charmer, spotted a group of sorority girls. He put on his most sincere smile and, after a few minutes of friendly banter, convinced one of them to let us use her designated spot. We all had a good laugh, and for a moment everything was perfect. Hunter's sister, a junior at UCSB, had graciously offered up her apartment floor for all of us to crash. It might sound a bit ratchet, but during Deltopia, having a place to sleep is the ultimate prize. Her and her roommates were incredibly welcoming, so we decided to start the party with them that night. It wasn't officially Deltopia yet, but the mood was already electric. I need to mention one more thing. Hunter is a ridiculously friendly guy and a lot of people know him. Among his many acquaintances was a guy named Amir. I'm using the word friend pretty generously here. Amir was one of those guys who seemed to cling to social circles without ever really being a part of them. He was insecure, loud, and constantly seeking validation. He had a knack for making every conversation about himself. We'd had some unpleasant run-ins with him in the past, so none of us were particularly fond of him. Amir had mentioned to Hunter a while back that he was going to be in town for Deltopia, but there was never any real conversation about where he'd be staying or who he'd be with. He wasn't part of our plan, and we hadn't spoken about him once on the drive down. About an hour after we settled into Hunter's sister's place, the five of us decided to go on an alcohol run for ourselves and the girls. As we were leaving the liquor store with our purchases, we saw him, Amir. He was just standing there on the curb, with his hands in his pockets, staring at us. We didn't say anything. We just kept walking toward the apartment, and he fell in step with us as if he'd been there all along. The first thing out of his mouth once we were a few blocks away was, "Why are you guys so surprised to see me?" We just ignored the question. Of course, we were surprised to see him. There was no plan to meet up with him, let alone hang out with him. As far as any of us knew, Hunter hadn't even told him where we were staying. Things immediately escalated once we got back to the apartment. Amir asked if he could use the bathroom, and then ran ahead of us when Hunter reluctantly agreed. When Hunter's sister, who didn't know Amir from Adam, opened the door, he walked right up to her and said, "I'm staying here," before stepping past her without waiting for a response. Hunter was livid. He pulled Amir aside, his face red with rage, and told him straight up that he was not welcome there, and that lying to his sister was a line he should have never crossed. Amir didn't go quietly. He stood outside the door for another 20 minutes, trying to argue his way back in. Hunter, however, is not the kind of guy you want to mess with, so Amir eventually took the hint and left. We got wasted after that, and admittedly, Amir was all any of us could talk about. We were all completely baffled. It wasn't until later that night, as we were still chatting about it, that we discovered the truth. Hunter had been sharing his iPhone location with Amir, a feature they'd enabled a while back. He hadn't just seen us. He had stalked us to the apartment. The realization sent a chill through our collective buzz, but we pushed it away, laughing about his weird obsessiveness and continuing to party. The next day, Deltopia certainly lived up to the hype. The streets were a sea of people, the music was deafening, and the sun beat down on a festival of pure chaos. By late afternoon, most of the shenanigans were done. We met up with 5 of our other friends, and the 10 of us found ourselves chilling back at Hunter's sister's apartment. We filled the rest of the guys in on the Amir situation, and they found it just as odd as we did. That's when one of our friends, Ryland, said, "I'm pretty sure I have Amir's location." He immediately checked his phone and his jaw dropped. He turned the phone toward us, and I swear to God, the little blue dot was showing up basically on top of us. He was right outside. As soon as we mentioned it, the dot started moving away quickly, as if Amir had been spying on us from a car and was now driving away. It was bizarre. Him showing up a second time was borderline psychotic, especially after Hunter had explicitly told him he wasn't welcome. We probably should have taken the whole thing more seriously than we did. That behavior was extreme even for Amir. Instead, we all just laughed about his weird obsessiveness and continued partying. That night, after we had all crashed, I woke up randomly sometime well after midnight. The apartment was dead quiet, save for the hum of the fridge. I barely had time to process my surroundings when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of glass shattering from somewhere deeper in the apartment. My heart shot into my throat. I shot up off the floor, looking around to see if anyone else was awake. No one was, probably because everyone had gone to sleep completely wasted. I realized pretty quickly that I was the only one who had heard it, and if someone had broken in, I was the only one who could do anything about it. My mind immediately went to Amir. I didn't have a weapon or anything, so I grabbed an empty wine bottle off the floor, took a deep breath, and started creeping toward the noise. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The shadows of the hallway were long and menacing, and the floorboards seemed to creak with every step. When I entered the living room, a cold draft hit me. The sliding door that led to the balcony had been completely shattered, and a huge rock sat in the middle of the floor. surrounded by a glittering mosaic of glass shards. I didn't need any more convincing. I knew Amir was behind it. I was about to go wake my friends up when, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a closet door handle jiggle. I froze, more scared than I had been just moments before. I didn't think Amir had the guts to go beyond destroying property. The thought that he had actually broken into the apartment and was still inside terrified me. I was just about to yank the closet door open when my better judgment forced me not to. Instead, I snuck back to the bedroom, woke Hunter up, and told him to back me up. The two of us walked toward the living room, but by the time we got there, the closet door was wide open. I looked around frantically, but I didn't see him. That's when Hunter reached into the closet and pulled out this massive kitchen knife. I stared in shock. Amir had literally been standing behind the door with a knife, probably intending to injure me. He could have literally ended my life had I opened that closet door. That was the most horrifying moment of my life. Hunter and I woke the rest of the house up, and we did a sweep to be 100% sure that Amir was nowhere in the apartment. We obviously got the police involved, but all that really came of that was just getting a police report. They told us property tends to get destroyed during Deltopia, and we were one of the many victims. Before you ask, Amir had stopped sharing his location with Ryland, so we couldn't even show the police that. We had to leave the next morning. Hunter was freaked out about leaving his sister and her roommates there, especially knowing that Amir had managed to sneak in there once already. Before we got in the car, he pulled out his phone and typed out this massive paragraph to Amir. A final, furious message. The message never delivered, though. Amir had already blocked him. We all pulled out our phones and realized we had all been blocked too. Over the next few weeks, none of us heard from him. It was like he had fallen off the map completely. I still can't wrap my head around all of this. As aggressive as Amir often pretends to be, he doesn't have a history of violence. In fact, I've always thought of him as a little passive. He knows where all of us live, so I'm still worried, even while writing this out, that he's going to do something drastic. I'll send an update should something ever happen. We hope you found these stories as chilling as we did. These are just a few examples of the terrifying things that can happen when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. If you have a story of your own, we want to hear it. Leave a comment below, share this with a friend, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Dark Britain Files.